It's the opposite.
High fly ball, deep left field. Oh, 27 does it again.
Gone. Fernando Tatis Jr. with a 2-run shot has the Padres on the board. Ball and 2 strikes to Shohei here. Oh,
Got it, got it, got it! 33!
Oh, wow. Where did that one go? That's his 11th home run.
Driven out to deep center field. Going back, Springer, turning, looking, see ya! Oh, what a shot by Judge! The Yankees lead 1-0.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to episode 3 of Free Baseball podcast. I know our graphic says Mondays at 5. We're going to be switching to 4. We'll get that changed pretty soon. We're going to go ahead and get into our start. We're going to be missing Isaiah again today, but we're going to start talking about the MLB and the Players Union negotiations again. There's been a little bit of bickering back and forth and talks of a mediator. Why don't you kick us off, Jake?
So I think this is our third straight podcast talking about the negotiations between the MLB and the MLBPA. But as of now, it's still no progress. Like you said, the MLB requested mediation, which is just asking the government for some help to fix their argument. They just need they wanted a third person to be like, hey, can you help us out with our argument, please? And please take our side. The MLBPA declined because they didn't think that the MLB or that MLB really needs a mediator, that this whole thing needs a mediator because the MLB isn't really cooperating. A tweet from Max Scherzer a couple days ago, he said that they're looking for a system with salary threshold and penalties that don't function as caps, allows younger players to realize more of their market value and make service time manipulation a thing of the past, and eliminates tanking as a winning strategy. So obviously the MLBPA is on the side of trying to make the game better for themselves, for the fans and such, while MLB is just not really cooperating. They had said they would make a counteroffer to that first offer, and after 2 days they went back on that, saying that they wouldn't make any counter offers. And it's really not going well. What do you think?
Yeah. There's been several players that have spoken out on Twitter, especially after hearing that they were seeking a mediator. I know Tyler Matzik is pretty vocal about the issue. Trevor May's been pretty vocal about the issue. And Marcus Stroman had a tweet that I want to read out. And they're pretty harsh towards the whole situation in Rob Manfred, and it's Man Clown and his boys need to figure it out and stop ruining the game of baseball. He's also retweeted in the last few days, especially after that tweet, that Rob Manfred is the worst thing that has ever happened to baseball.
That's crazy.
Which is pretty rough when your commissioner of baseball is getting this heavily criticized by your own players. And once again, we always like to reiterate, and we've done it all 3 shows now. Rob Manfred does not work for the players. Rob Manfred serves the owners, and he will always do that. He's the commissioner of baseball, not the commissioner of baseball players. It's basically a boss trying to take advantage of their workers, is what this whole thing's amounting to.
Mm-hmm.
So he's also accusing Major League Baseball of deliberately delaying the season because I know a lot of people don't understand how this whole lockout works, but baseball could still be played right now. The owners chose to lock out the players.
Correct.
This isn't like it reached a deadline. This is what's going to happen. The owners made this conscious decision to lock out baseball. So if spring training's delayed, it's on the owners. They could open it up as soon as they wanted to. They just haven't done so.
Yeah, because they don't need a an agreement to lift the lockout. They just want that as protection right now because they think the players union might strike. And if they're on a lockout, the players union can't strike. So right now it's sort of just like a backup plan for them just in case like things start getting worse. But yeah, it sort of doesn't look too great for the fans, like seeing that like we're supposed to have pitchers and catchers reporting next week And we still don't seem to have any progress. I did find a couple stats that stand out very big. There some important stats when discussing this, discussing the MLBPA and the MLB negotiations. So Joe Doyle on Twitter, I forget what his @ was. It just said Joe Doyle, said that the average payroll in 2011 was around 93 million. And in 10 years, it's gone up to 104 million in 2021, which is an increase of 12%. And during that same time period, the average value of teams has jumped 365% from 523 million to 1.9 billion in that same time span, meaning that the payrolls for teams are not following the valuations of those franchises. So as the franchises become more valuable, as they be getting more money from concessions, etc., TV deals and all that kind of stuff, they keep becoming more and more worth a lot of money. And all the while, we're not seeing that same increase in payrolls, which we should be seeing something at least similar. Like 12% to 365% is insane. If we got a 365% growth in the sport, then we need to see at least 100% growth in salaries or in payrolls. Here's one more from Evan Altman. He said the average MLB salary in 2021 was 4.17 million, which is down 6.4% from 2017. The median salary of 1.15 million was down 30% from 2015. He also continues to say, but yeah, player payroll is why it costs more to go to a baseball game, which is not.
Yeah. Once again, trying to shift this on the players is a little ridiculous because all the players are seeking with their new collective bargaining agreement is a little bit more of that slice of the pie, because the owners are generating more revenue, even in the lockout when they're all claiming not to. The owners are still generating a lot of revenue, and the values of their franchises are going up, and that's only going to change more as TV deals start to rise in cost and overall money value going towards the sport. So the players are just asking for their fair share, which they so far have not really gotten. Player in baseball, everyone talks about millionaires arguing with billionaires over chump change to them, and it's not true. Minor league players don't get paid anything. They're still seeking something for the minor league players. Players don't really make a great deal of money until they hit arbitration, and normally it's not even until their second year of arbitration. So the players are just seeking earlier arbitration, more player rights, and just that little bit more of their piece of the pie they feel that they're deserving of, which I know I feel that way that they are, and I'm sure you do too. But as things stand right now, it's looking like it is heading towards spring training being delayed. And it's probably not going to get any better. I don't think the mediator plan is going to happen. And so far, I think the longest the two sides have met have been for 45 minutes, and nothing has changed. Which carries on into the fact that we'll probably just have virtual baseball to deal with. And the new cover athlete of MLB The Show 22 was announced, and it's Shohei Ohtani, as pretty much everyone expected.
Boy.
What do you think about the cover?
Well, I'm a big MLB The Show fan. I've been playing since like 2009. I buy the game every year. I'm one of those guys who buys 2 different types of video games, and one of them is MLB The Show. The other one's Pokemon, if you can see the Squirtle above my head. Anyway, yeah, I'm pumped to see Shohei coming out on the cover of the show. They definitely could have gone MLB The Show without the W. That
I think so too.
That would have been pretty funny with the pun. But yeah, I don't know who else it could have been. We already saw Tatis last year. Like, it's either Vladdy or Shohei, but Shohei definitely deserves. It's gonna be sick. I mean, he was already in the game the last few years, but yeah, having like a 99 Shohei right when the game comes out is going to be dope. And if you haven't seen, go check out the MVP edition cover. He's got a anime/manga style cover art. That one's pretty cool. Definitely am going to be pre-ordering that game, and I'm ready to play some Show in a few months.
Yeah, I'm getting pretty excited for it now. All they really need to complete, Shohei Ohtani being on the cover is actually implementing 2-way players. It doesn't really work.
They have it on Road to the Show. So like if you want to pitch and hit, you can do it on Road to the Show. One more thing about the MLB The Show cover athlete is we saw like a leak that had Derek Jeter on the MVP edition. So I'm not really sure what's coming up with that. A lot of people were guessing that was going to be the cover revealed because when they revealed the MVP edition, it was on February 2nd, 2022. So that's 2/2/22, and Derek Jeter's number is number 2. So a bit surprising not to see him on there, but that doesn't mean that he's not still in the game. He could still definitely be in the game. Definitely pumped to see what kind of new legends are going to be in that first gameplay video, probably in about a month or so. But yeah, love the show.
I do too. It's going to be an exciting year for the show. Hopefully it won't be like last year where basically all you had was the show until August when the season started.
But I don't even think it came out until like April
March.
When it usually comes out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
March.
I thought it came out super late and normally comes out way earlier. So yeah, it was sort of rough during.
Yeah.
I think I'm thinking of 2020 when it was super delayed.
I think that's right. Let's go ahead and jump into your. I know you released another top 50 fantasy starting pitchers article, and I know you wanted to talk about 3 more guys. Let's go ahead and start on that. Talk about your first guy, Shane McClanahan.
Yeah, so I had originally released a top 25, and so I finished out the top 50 by doing the 26 through 50. So this is more of like the mid-range starting pitchers, the guys you're going to be getting after pick 100, maybe a little closer to 200 and stuff. But these guys are the ones that you're taking dart throws on, maybe like not really. I wouldn't say dart throws. These guys are your like number 4, number 5, number 3 starters. You got to get the guys with upside though, because you're a little later into the draft. So one of my favorite guys to rank on this list was Shane McClanahan. And that's because I enjoyed having him on my team last year. I waited a couple starts to pick him up in fantasy, but once I picked him up, he was just incredible. I have him ranked at number 29. He's a member of the Rays. Obviously, he pitched in the postseason last year for them. Last year in 2021, he went 10-6 with 123 innings pitched, a 3.43 ERA, and a 1.27 WHIP, with 141 strikeouts in those 123 innings. And that was pretty solid. Definitely really good for a rookie year. He made his debut in the postseason in 2020 for the Rays, which already shows just what kind of a talent he is. And I really think he is more than just a talent. I think he's a special talent with an amazing repertoire. He's got 4 incredible pitches. He's got a fastball with the highest average velocity from a left-handed starter. That's 96.5 miles per hour. With a minimum of 100 innings pitched. His second best pitch is an incredible slider, 21.3% swinging strike rate, where double digit is good and 15% swinging strike rate is elite, and he's at 21%. And that comes with an 89.2 mile per hour average velocity. So he's basically a younger DeGrom from the left side, just throwing gas, sliders and fastballs, but then he's also got a curveball that has a 43% CSW, which is called strikes plus whiffs. So that's how many swings and misses he's getting on that pitch, plus how many times he's not getting any swings but getting that strike. So that's a really important stat that comes from Pitcher List. And he also gets a 241 xWOBA against on that curveball. So he's really limiting the hard contact. And then he's got that fourth pitch, which is a changeup, which somehow gets 72.7% ground balls. He coaxes ground balls just at an amazing rate with that changeup. So if you start using it more next year, it could just add to a repertoire that's already just incredibly deadly. And like I said, he only had the 141 strikeouts in 123 innings last year, which is good. It's more than a strikeout per 9. But I think he could reach another level, get that strikeout percentage over 30% next year, because his repertoire just speaks to higher strikeout upside. Really, the only questions for him next year are whether the Rays will hold him back like they've done with a lot of starters, especially young starters in the past, and or will they deem him the ace to replace Glasnow as he recovers from Tommy John next year. Currently, McClanahan's got an ADP of 111.6, and that's since the 1st of January. This is a different ADP than what was on the article. And that puts him as the number 32 SP with a high pick of 82 and a low pick of 166. So I'm jumping on him inside the top 100, maybe just right outside it. I really think he could be a sneaky ace next year, especially if he gets a lot more volume, if they really need to count on him for that. I know they got Kluber and stuff, but McClanahan is going to be the ace of that staff.
I agree. Glasnow's coming back from his torn UCL, is getting Tommy John surgery. McClanahan in 2021 pitched to a 3.43 ERA, but he had a 3.31 FIP. And Tropicana's not exactly a pitcher's park. It's kind of a middle of the road park. 27.3 K%, and his ATC projections have him somewhere around that. It's got him with the 3.68 ERA and a 3.63 FIP, which would be pretty good and just about what he did in 2021, with room to grow. Of course, he's one of the best. I think he's one of the best left-handed starters in the league, which are kind of at a premium.
His stuff is crazy.
He's just, I like him. One of the things that he really does well is strikes out a lot, doesn't walk guys, and like you said, change up, generates ground balls, which is just really good. The Rays have a really good infield defense, and outfield defense too, with Kevin Kiermaier, as long as they still have him. I like the McClanahan pick. Let's jump into a player of a similar profile with Carlos Rodon.
Yeah, so I had Rodon at 41 on my list, and I think I might end up moving him down, even though he's sort of ranked a lot higher in the NFBC ADP. Since January 1st, he's going off as the number 35 starting pitcher with a 132.5 ADP, the high of 85 and a low of 239. I don't think I'd be taking a chance on him inside the top 200. Last year, he was incredible. He threw a no-hitter. He made the All-Star team for the first time and finished 5th in American League Cy Young Award voting. And that was with the help of a 13-5 record, 132 innings pitched, a 2.37 ERA, a 0.96 whip, and 185 strikeouts. The way that he got to this next level was increasing his fastball velocity 2.4 miles per hour up to 95.4 miles per hour. So he was sitting in 92, 93 before this year. And he was able to stay on the field for the whole year. Prior to this year, from 17 to 20, he had a 10.25 starts per year. He was not making too many starts a year, throwing fewer than 100 innings each year for the last 4 years. And then, so now we see him get up to 130. So it's really hard to predict him to go forward and continue this pace, not only with the production, but also with the volume. He has an extensive injury history. He had really good luck in 2021, a 267 BABIP, where the league average is around 300. He had an 82.2% left on base rate, which is normally in the mid 70s. He also faded down the stretch in September. His fastball velocity dropped all the way down to 92.9 miles per hour. As I mentioned before, I said 95.4 average for the year. So he dropped 2.5 miles per hour, the same amount that he had gained earlier in the season. So it's going to be important to see if he can maintain that velo going into next year, because that's going to be really important. That's really what made him unhittable this year, was getting that new velocity. And if we saw that, like, once he started getting tired, once the season started going on, once he started realizing like, oh shoot, I've never really pitched this much in a single season before, we saw him started falling back. I'm not even sure he made his first scheduled start in the postseason. I'm pretty sure he made one, but I think he missed his first one. But
right.
Yeah, he's also a free agent, so he'll be in a new organization for the first time. He was drafted by the White Sox. He's always been a White Sox. He was a free agent last year, but the White Sox signed him back for 1 year. But this year he's a free agent again, and the White Sox didn't give him a qualifying offer, which sort of shows that maybe he's dealing with injuries, and that's what led to that reduced velocity later on in the season. But ATC projects him to bump his ERA over 1 point to 3.55, his ERA to 1.14, and they've got him for 130 innings with 160 strikeouts. I really think his talent is good, as long as he maintains that velo, but I'm staying very far away because I don't think he's going to have that same amount of volume. And even if he does, I don't think he's going to have the same level of production as we saw him fade down the stretch. He's really going to have to work on his stamina during the offseason to keep me interested.
Yeah, the thing with Rodon that kind of jumped off the page for me, just looking at him a little bit on Baseball Savant, and looking at run value by pitch type, if you compare his 2021 to basically every other year he's pitched, it was just almost a complete outlier. He threw 4 pitches, primarily just 3 pitches in 2021, just like 2020. 4-seamer slider with the occasional changeup, and his 4-seamer, which you talked about already, was just otherworldly in 2021. And that kind of leads me to think that that's not really sustainable. It had a minus 26 run value, which is ridiculous.
What the heck?
Yeah, compared to in 2020 it was 2. So it had a 2 run value in 2020 with a 199 batting average against, almost basically a 30% K percentage and a 25% put away percent on a fastball, which is really good. And but the thing that jumps off the page to me is league average hard hit percent is 35%, and it's still, when it was that good, it had a 40% hard hit percent, and that leads me to believe that if he doesn't still keep that fastball velocity, he'll just go back to getting hit really hard and trying to be a deceptive starter with that slider. That's still a good pitch. His changeup's not really anything special. His slider was pretty good. I think it had a minus 14 run value. Yeah, which is good and relatively in keeping with him before. If he takes a jump, it was 7 in 2019, and then he was awful in 2020. So there's not really much to go off there. I think he could be good, but like you said, I would stay away. I know a couple of the teams that were reportedly interested in him before MLB was locked out were the Cubs, which would be a decent ballpark to pitch in. But the Yankees were the other suitor for him, and him pitching in Yankee Stadium, if he gets hit hard, he's going to give up a ton of runs. They play in a little league park. It is what it is.
Yeah. Where would you want him to go? Like if you saw him sign with the Rays or the Dodgers or something, would that sort of change your mind on his outlook for next year?
I think if he signed with someone like the Giants, or a team that has a pretty pitcher friendly ballpark with a good defense around him, he's a strikeout pitcher is what it looks like. And I think if you can give him a little bit of help when he does get hit hard, like a Tampa Bay or like a San Francisco, I think he'd probably do pretty well there. Maybe even Seattle, even though that's not it's kind of another middle of the road park, a little bit leaning more towards pitcher friendly. Those are probably the teams that I would want to see him with. I wouldn't want him. I'm a Cubs fan. I wouldn't want him on the Cubs just because he was not very kind talking about the Cubs when they were terrible. So I wouldn't want him. And speaking of the Mariners, your last pick was potentially their budding ace. Why don't you talk about Logan Gilbert?
Yeah, so I had Logan Gilbert ranked at 44. I really think he's an interesting pitcher going into next year. He sort of had an underwhelming debut last year in his rookie season for the Mariners. He threw 119 innings with a 4.68 ERA, but that was with a 1.17 whip and 128 strikeouts. So the strikeout levels aren't too high, and the whip is really low compared to that mid-4s ERA. If you look under the hood, he sort of had a more promising season than maybe those basic surface numbers would say. XFIP and xERA say otherwise. He had a 4.19 XFIP and a 4.09 xERA, and those are very predictive for the following year as opposed to regular ERA. He also had a very, I don't know how to say it, like a promising path towards his final season end numbers. He came out of the gates ice cold in May. That's when I had him on my fantasy team. He had a 5.94 ERA in May. But then he started to figure things out for a couple months. In June and July, he had a 3.38 ERA. So it really started to look like he was figuring things out in the MLB, learning how to attack MLB hitters. But then he faced an adjustment phase as hitters started realizing what kind of stuff he had, and teams started game planning against him. And that forced him to struggle in August to a 9.13 ERA, which was absolutely horrible. But here's the part that's the most promising. He made the correct adaptation to that horrible month and finished strong with a 2.70 ERA in September / October. So his ability to make adjustments bodes very well for his future, because it shows that if he faces any more adversity next season, he's going to be able to make those correct changes to get him back on track. But I think the thing that stands out about him the most, other than that path to his 4.68 ERA, is how amazing his slider is. Remember, McClanahan's was like a 21.3% swinging strike rate and 15% as elite. Gilbert is at 18.9% swinging strike rate on that slider, which is elite. above elite. He's got a really deadly slider in there. I think that can really pick up his strikeouts. And one thing that I really like about him is that he really limits the walks even more than McClanahan, even more than Rodon. 5.6 walk percentage is just so low. He's not going to be allowing free base runners. That'll keep his whip low. That'll keep fewer scoring opportunities off base. And that can be seen in his 2022 ATC projections, which have him for 142 innings after he threw 119 last year, a 4.19 ERA, a 1.19 whip, and a 148 strikeouts. But I think those strikeouts can definitely get a lot higher if he leans into that slider. He's got a mid-90s fastball. He's going off as the number 46 pitcher right now at a 153.8 ADP. And that's pretty good. I'd take him inside the top 150 because he's got some really good upside, and I think pitching in a pitcher friendly ballpark like Seattle's really gives him a solid floor to continue doing what he did last year or get even better. I think the only thing to worry about though is like the sophomore slump type of stuff, but that's normally an argument that you make about somebody that hasn't really faced any adversity. And like I went through, we've seen Gilbert face adversity twice, both in May and August. So he might already be through that adjustment phase, and next year he could just take off, get into that upper echelon of right-handed starting pitchers. What do you think?
Yeah, looking at Logan Gilbert closely, like you said, the underlying numbers look like they help him a little bit, and they do. You know, he had a 3.73 FIP, which is what I normally like to look at to see just how good, you know, a pitcher pitched just in a vacuum. So he had a 3.73 FIP, which is pretty good. And then looking at his Savant numbers, just the same as Rodon, his was really weird. He had a -9. You talked about his slider and how disgusting his slider is. That had 10-run value. He couldn't put anybody away with it. It had a 17.7 put away percent. They didn't hit it hard, but he couldn't strike anybody out with it, is what it looked like. And then you can look at his four-seamer, and it had a -19 run value, which would lead me to believe that it was just unbelievable, but it had a 50.6 hard hit percent, and they slugged 400 against it. Like it's like he couldn't buy any luck. His changeup looked okay. It was his highest put away percent, and it had a 37.5 K percent, and he threw it 165 times, which isn't a lot, granted, but the hitters slugged almost 700 against it. He couldn't. It looks like he would have a good pitch, and then it would go pretty good, and it would just get destroyed for a bit. And that probably would lead into his. Didn't you say it was May that he was ice cold?
Yeah, like when he first came up, he really wasn't too great in his first few starts.
You know, he didn't start out really well. He picked it up a little bit in the middle, and then slumped again. And I think he's honestly just struggling to figure out how to attack hitters, like you said. And now that he's got a little bit more experience doing that, it should help him. Plus, he probably just needs to be the benefactor of a little bit of luck. Baseball is a game that's got a lot of randomness to it, and sometimes you can play really good, sometimes you can do everything right, and sometimes it still won't work your way. You know, and I think he could be good. It's more of like a wait and see, at least for me. I like Logan Gilbert, and I like what he can be, and I really think that the Mariners will be a good team, and he'll be part of that. It's just more of a wait and see than I would buy in on him right now kind of deal.
Yeah, a rotation with Robbie Ray and Logan Gilbert reaching his potential, and Marco Gonzalez and a couple other guys they have there. They got so many guys in the minor leagues too. The Mariners are going to be scary in a couple years, especially with freaking Julio Rodriguez coming up. Is that his name? Yeah.
Marco Gonzalez was another one that it was a weird thing with Mariners pitchers is what it looked like. Marco Gonzalez looked like he had a pretty good year on paper, and he had a 5.28 FIP. It's just like they had a lot of weird breaks go against them to make it a rough year, at least pitching wise, for the Mariners.
Yeah, maybe having like a secure ace like Ray will keep people from going all over the place with the production.
Yeah, I think their number one starter going into last year was Marco Gonzalez, which I like him, and I think he's a good pitcher, but he's not really a number one.
He's not an ace.
No.
Not an ace for a playoff team.
Not at all. We'll go ahead and bridge into talking about our big topic of the podcast, and that's going to be more or less breaking down and less breaking down and more kind of criticizing ESPN's top 100 players of all time. We're going to give, for both of us, we're going to give one player we think was snubbed from the list, one that we think was ranked way too high, and one that we think that was ranked a little bit too low. Let's go ahead and start with who we think was a little bit too high. Who did you have as your too high pick?
I had a hard time keeping myself to just one player for each of these. So
I'll go ahead and run down all of them.
All right. So for players ranked too high, I had looks like I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yikes. So first off, I had Harper on there. I do think he will be on this list by the time his career is done. But at this point, I know you're not comparing like his total career stats to all the career stats of the Hall of Famers and stuff. It's just like what sort of pace is he on right now? He's got 40 B-WAR and 2 MVPs. So if you double that, I don't know, maybe 80 B-WAR and 4 MVPs. Probably not 4 MVPs, but he's really good. I just don't think he's as high as number. Where do they have him? They had him at 94. I don't think he's in the top 100 right now, especially with some of the other guys that they didn't put on that are currently playing. But yeah, Harper's got 267 home runs right now. I think it's going to be a couple more years till you can safely say he's top 100 of all time. Like this is not just of the last 50 years or whatever. This is in the 150 years of how as long as baseball's been playing. So next I had Willie Stargell at 88. Nothing against him. I just thought that he was too high. He's got 475 home runs, a 282 lifetime batting average, and 57.5 B-WAR. He won the 1979 MVP. That 57 B-WAR just puts him so low on the list. I don't know how he got on that high, especially when you have a guy like, I think Jim Thome is at like 97 or something, 96, which I was fine with that because he's got like a very low batting average, but he's got over 600 home runs. I don't know how you can put Stargell, who is like a fraction of Thome, 10 spots ahead of him. So yeah, I really thought that he should be lowered mostly because of where Thome was. And that was the same when I got to Killebrew, who's at number 70. He was pretty crazy during his playing time. I think he had like 8 different 40 home run seasons, which is wild, but he is just Jim Thome. He batted 256 for his career with 573 home runs and 60.4 B-WAR. So obviously he didn't have really any defensive value. He was just a home run hitter. I don't think he should be this high at number 70. I think he should be down in that 90s next to Thome and Stargell. Next, I had Whitey Ford. This list really just hyped up Yankees. I don't know if it was just the media for ESPN just being Yankees fans, or if they were just taking into account World Series way too much, because obviously for the first, like from the 1920s to the 90s, like the Yankees were just dominating forever. And so obviously all these teams, all these guys on the Yankees got a bunch of World Series innings and plate appearances and stuff. But I don't like, obviously like some guys are going to perform better and some guys are going to perform worse in the postseason. But just to have all these opportunities because you're on a team that spends so much extra money doesn't mean that you should be bumped up so high. But a guy like Whitey Ford was ranked at 60. He's got a 2.75 career ERA, which is crazy, but he's only got 53.5 B-WAR, and he did most of his damage with 146 innings pitched in the World Series, which is crazy. Like, I definitely think that merits him getting onto this list, but some of the pitchers that he was ahead of were
he's a little too high.
Pretty outrageous.
He was 60, and they had guys behind him that, and not even on the list, one that I'll talk about later, that had just much better overall careers than him. He just was the benefactor of playing for great Yankees teams and performing in the World Series, which does merit value. I'm not going to say like, oh, if you perform in the postseason, it doesn't matter, because it does. But I mean, 60, I don't think so. I mean, I think he'd be on I think he'd be in the 100, but I don't think he'd be that high.
I really thought that they had the starters just totally out of whack. Like I couldn't understand their ranking. I mean, I know that they were doing like all of the ESPN writers do their own rankings and then combine those into an average ranking. But yeah, I mean, Whitey Ford definitely deserves to be on there, but not that high. And starting pitchers were very wonky. Before I hit these last 4, you want to tell me yours?
Yeah, I didn't have as many as you did, but I did have a couple that I wanted.
I just didn't want to miss anybody.
It's all right. Well, I had Whitey Ford on my list too. I thought he was way too high. One that I thought was a little bit too high. I don't remember exactly where he was on the list, but it was outside of the top 50 was Hank Greenberg. And Hank Greenberg was another player that I kind of felt was like Killebrew and like Thome. And I mean, I think he was somewhere in like the 70s, and I just don't see it. You know, he had a relatively short career. He only played for 13 years, but he won 2 MVPs in a time where he played in the 30s. And he played on some decent Tigers teams. But I mean, hit 55 WAR, 330 home runs. Like, I mean, it's not the most impressive. I wouldn't have had him. I think he was in the low 70s. I wouldn't have put him there. I also had Pete Rose, which everyone boomers love Pete Rose. I mean, he's the hit king, whatever. I mean, he played for like 7 more seasons than he had any value.
Did you see the stat in that article where in the ESPN Top 100 article where they were saying that in his like final 5 seasons or whatever, he hit like 3 home runs? Pete Rose.
I didn't see that, but I believe that.
Yeah, like he was really just holding on by a string.
Well, he played for way too long trying to break Ty Cobb's hits record. And one of the things that I liked looking at was you can look at win probability added.
Mm-hmm.
And basically he was at bare minimum, like he was like a 2-3 win player. He had a couple years where he was just insane, where he had 7.
I think he averaged like 5 WAR during like a 6-year span in the 70s.
And then he hit 1982 and he hit a wall and fell off, and then played until 86. Played for 24 years. He wasn't any good for like 6 of them. Like, I don't know how people can. Yeah, he had to get the hit record, and he still had to get the hits. But I mean, he played forever, and he never got hurt. What do you expect?
He belongs on this list too.
He belongs on the list, but he's not. They had him at 34. No chance.
That's insane. Outside of the top 50, definitely.
You could argue on those big red machine teams, he wasn't even their 3rd best player. Like you could really say that Joe Morgan was a better player than him. Johnny Bench, for my mind, was definitely a better player than Pete Rose.
Mm-hmm.
And you can say that Perez was better than him. Like, Pete Rose was a slap hitter that played forever. That's basically what he was. And the only other older player that I'm gonna slander as too high was Walter Johnson. I thought Walter Johnson was way too high at number 9, and everyone talks about he's like 2nd or 3rd all time for WAR, but
that's amongst all players.
All players. And I'm not saying he doesn't deserve to be on the list. I don't think he's the greatest pitcher of all time, and he was number 9. And we said that the starting pitcher rankings were really weird. He was the best pitcher ranked on the list, and he was number 9.
Yeah.
He pitched. So first off, he played from 1907 to 1927. His entire career outside of the last like 4 years was in the dead ball era. His strikeouts per 9 for his career, and everyone talks about how much of a strikeout machine Walter Johnson was. His strikeouts per 9 for his career was 5.3. He struck out 5 batters per 9.
I was trying to find strikeout per 9 plus, which would adjust for era, but I couldn't figure out which website that was on. So maybe next time I'll come up with that one.
Yeah, his career ERA was 2.17. Dead ball league average was 2.8. So he was better than average, but not by that much. Walter Johnson played in a time where starting pitchers pitched basically every other day, and they pitched the 9 innings. And if you didn't pitch the 9 innings, you weren't a man. That's basically what he was. The big thing that I found really interesting about him, everyone talks about Walter Johnson and includes him in the fireballers of all time conversation. He was clocked one time in I believe it was an armory or a factory or something. He threw 134 feet per second, which equates to 91 miles an hour.
He was throwing sidearm though.
He was throwing sidearm, but Ryan Spader adjusted this for the time. Walter Johnson likely sat 88. So Walter Johnson was likely the starting pitcher version of like Chad Bradford or like Dan Herron. And I really don't like comparing eras, but you can't make this list without comparing players from different eras. If you're going to make a top 100 all time, you have to. In the dead ball era, until Babe Ruth came along, the home run record in a season was 27. And just some players in 2021, for an example, that hit 21 home runs were Andrew McCutchen, Dansby Swanson, and Matt Chapman. And for an example, another one I want to throw in there, CJ Cron would have been the all-time home run leader if he had done that. I just think there was way too much value in Walter Johnson, and then to have him at 9 when you have guys on the list, like for my mind, I think the best starting pitcher of all time is Pedro Martinez.
I think he was the second.
He was.
Highest. Yeah,
he was. I think he was. I want to say he was in the teens. But Pedro Martinez basically did that, but he pitched in a time where it was a hitter's league and not a pitcher's league. And when starters didn't go all 9 innings, and he had arguably the most dominant peak of all time, that's probably going to be challenged by Jacob deGrom. But
I think on that article they said he had I think it was the 2000 and 2001 or 99 and 2000, whenever he won the back-to-back Cy Youngs, he had an ERA under 2 during that time, during those 2 seasons, and the average ERA during that time was like 4.7. Yeah, 4.5, insane.
Yeah, he had a year. He led the league in strikeouts several times, and his back-to-back Cy Young year, he had in 99 he had a 2.07 ERA, and in 2000 he had a 1.74 ERA.
Insane.
With a 2.91 ERA plus. So he was almost 3 starting pitchers by himself. I think that you can't realistically, for me, say that Walter Johnson was the best pitcher of all time.
Yeah. I definitely think he deserves to be in the top 5, at least if you're looking at Jaws and Warren and etc. They have a thing called S Jaws, I think, which I think was accounting for all the innings that pitchers were throwing in the dead ball era. But I don't think, I agree with you. I don't think Walter's number 1. I think he's top 5. I think like Randy and Pedro need to definitely be above him.
That's what I would say is Randy. I would probably have Randy. I would probably have Pedro, and I would probably have Greg Maddux over him.
Oh yeah, Maddux definitely. Let me just rattle off a few more guys that I thought were ranked too high. I had Yogi Berra. He's obviously one of the most well-known players, but I don't think that's for his playing time. Not that he was a bad player. He hit 358 home runs, batted 285, and I think he had more walks than strikeouts for his career. No, I think he had more home runs than strikeouts in a lot of seasons too, which is insane. Something you wouldn't see now. And he's a 10 times World Series champ, but he had 59.6 BWAR, not that high. I think Jaws had him as like the 4th best catcher, and they have him at, I think, number 2 behind Johnny Bench on here, but they have him up at 39. And I thought that was too high and just took into account too much of his playoff stuff. I definitely think he needs to be on the list, but definitely more closer to Pudge and those guys. I had Pete Rose on there. I had Mariano, who I definitely also think should be on the list. He's the best reliever of all time. I don't think he should be 31. That was just way too high for a guy that only threw 1,283 innings. Yeah, 1 pitch, but he only threw 1,283 innings, which is obviously not his fault. But like, you have guys on here with 5,000, 6,000 innings pitched behind him. So Mo definitely deserves to be on here, but I think it's more in the 75 range. And then the last one I had was obviously Jeter. He has a 310 average and 260 home runs for his career. He's got the incredible 3,465 hits, but he's only got 71.3 BWAR because
he was terrible.
His defense was not that great. Yeah, and I think he needs to be in more of that like 45 range. They had him at 28. I think 45 was around where Tony Gwynn, George Brett, and those like contact hitters from the 90s and the 80s were. Boggs was in there too. I think Jeter's more around that area where just like the elite contact hitters with like a little bit of power and who maybe didn't really provide a ton of defense. Unlike Gwynn, maybe Gwynn should be a little higher. But yeah, I think that's about it for guys that were ranked too high. Who do you have ranked too low?
For my too low, I had a couple. One that I'll go a little bit more in depth on. I thought Adrian Beltre was way too low. He was number 97. He should be a little bit higher. I mean, he had 3,000 hits. He basically did whatever you want a third baseman to do. Another one, I thought outside of like Mike Schmidt, I thought the third base position was honestly kind of neglected in this too.
Definitely.
I thought Brooks Robinson was way too low.
I thought Chipper was too low.
Chipper was way too low. He was like 78.
Yep.
He's if Mickey Mantle's the best switch hitter that's ever played, Chipper Jones is number 2. He should have easily been a lot higher than 78, which is really dumb. They had Steve Carlton at 56. I think Steve Carlton should have been a little bit higher.
Yeah, me too. I tweeted about him a few weeks ago. It sort of went off a little bit. Yeah, he's rarely talked about as one of the most dominant starters of all time. when he is really incredible. He's got over 4,000 strikeouts. I think he's got over 4,000 innings pitched. Like, not many guys have done that. It's like Randy and Nolan Ryan and him. I think that's it.
Yeah. And he's not like, I think, I don't know what his career WAR is. I'll look it up really quick.
It was in the 90s for Carlton.
90.2. I mean, he's a 10-time All-Star, won the pitching Triple Crown and 4 Cy Youngs, and they had him at 56.
That Triple Crown season is incredible. Go look up his BREF if you haven't, and just scroll a little bit through his page. It's really wild.
He was insane. I mean, he was just a great pitcher for any time, let alone his time. And we talked about this in the group chat. We have to talk about the show before, and we kind of thought this list at least kind of neglected late 70s and early 80s, or like late 70s and then players from the 80s. Those players just didn't get ranked where they needed to. And I thought there was a little bit more of an impetus to rank players that played in the 40s and back a little bit higher. And I'm not saying those players were bad, whatever. I have issues with a couple players on the list, like Rogers Hornsby. They should be on the list, but I have a couple issues with players like Rogers Hornsby and Tris Speaker, who I don't think made the list, but Cap Anson was on the list. Those guys.
Tris Speaker was on it.
Was he?
George Sisler was like the only old guy that missed it. Yeah.
George Sisler wasn't. That's right. I don't know. I thought the list kind of disrespected 80s and 70s baseball. I think Ricky Henderson was another one I thought was a little too low. I think they had him at 25 on the dot.
Yeah.
He's either 25 or 24. I think Ricky Henderson is probably a top 15 player that's ever played. He did everything. I mean, he hit for power. He's obviously the all-time stolen base leader. That's never going to be broken. He was just one of the all-time greats. Like an inner certain, I think the top 15 really needs to be the inner circle, and Ricky Henderson's right there. The one that I thought was definitely way too low, and I talked about him a little bit, was Joe Morgan. Joe Morgan, I mean, his stats don't exactly super jump off the page to you. I think he had a lifetime 271 average, but he's also the all-time leader at second base for walks. He's in the top 5 for on-base percentage. He hit 271, but he had a lifetime 392 on base. And he's second all time at the position in stolen bases.
He's like a left-handed Altuve, but with better discipline.
But way before his time. He was also an excellent defender, unlike Jose Altuve. Won multiple Gold Gloves. I think he won. He won 5 Gold Gloves and had 10 All-Star appearances. He had back-to-back MVPs. Not back-to-back MVPs. He had 2 MVPs. I think there was a season in between. He had 4 other top 5 finishes for MVP, and he led the league in walks and on base percentage 4 separate times, all throughout his career, at the start, in the middle, and at the end. He did everything.
Pretty impressive.
And like I said, I mean, for those Big Red Machine teams, I don't think Pete Rose was the best player on those teams. I think for me, it was either Johnny Bench or Joe Morgan. I thought he was definitely just a little bit overlooked. They had him in the 30s. I want to say he was 37. And Pete Rose was 34. I don't really agree.
Yeah, definitely. Pete Rose is not, shouldn't be higher than Rogan. Or what did Morgan?
Rose.
Gosh. I just said Joe Rogan. Oh, gosh.
He wasn't very good at baseball, I'm sure. Who'd you have that was too low?
I think I had 7 guys. Obviously, Beltre, like you mentioned, he had 477 home runs, and he's 3rd in WAR all time at third base. So I don't know how that makes him 97, but yeah, or not, 97. And then Chipper was at 78, who you mentioned also. He has a 303, 401, 529 slash line for his career with 468 home runs and 83.5 BWAR. You could say he's not better than Beltre, especially because Beltre was a better fielder, but Jones was a switch hitter, one of the best of all time. I definitely think he deserves at least a 10-spot jump. And then here's another one. Mel Ott was at 62. He batted 304, 414, 533 for his career, and he had 511 home runs. And to top it off, 110.9 BWAR, which I don't think there's anybody. He's ranked so low for somebody with that kind of BWAR. I think he should be a lot more closer to Jimmy Fox, who I think is in the inside the top 30. I think they have very similar home run totals. I know Fox was a catcher, and and got his average a lot higher than Ott. But I think Ott is one of those Hall of Famers that people don't talk about enough just because he was from such a weird time. But he had big power at a time when it was just like Ruth and Gehrig. After that, I have Miggy Cabrera, who's at 59. He's just got an incredible career that he's still adding to. He's next season, he's going to become the 7th player ever to hit 500 home runs and tally 3,000 hits. And I think that should already automatically bump him up way more just to have that longevity with the power and the contact ability. He's at 59. I think he deserves to be at least inside the top 40. I had Nolan Ryan on here as well. He was at 42. I don't know. Looking over it a little more, I started to have second guesses, but he was just so dominant for like 25 years. It's just insane.
All-time strikeout leader.
Exactly. Yeah. 5,714 strikeouts, over 5,000 innings pitched, over 300 wins, a 3.19 ERA, only 81.3 BWAR for somebody with that kind of volume is definitely weird because he was walking so many guys.
Yeah, all-time walks leader too.
Yeah. So, but I definitely think he's so memorable, and he's such a dominant pitcher that I think he deserves to be at least like 5 to 10 spots higher. And then my last two, which I think were really egregious. Having Pujols at 30 is just disrespectful. Pujols is easily, like you were saying, top 20 about Ricky Henderson. He's inner circle. Like he's got a 297, 375, 544 career slash line, and that's brought down by the last few years that he's been playing way below his level. But for his first decade in the major leagues, he was he was on pace to be one of the greatest players of all time, and he ended up being that. He's got 679 home runs for his career and 99.6 BWAR. He's gotten 3 MVPs in his career, and he's got over 3,300 hits. Definitely should be higher than 30. And then the last one was Bonds at 8. I think Bonds is top 5 without question. Top 3, he should be top 3. Right up there with Ruth and Mays and stuff. But yeah, 762 home runs, most walks of all time, 162.7 BWAR. I think that puts him second all time behind Ruth. But Bonds at 8 is just disrespectful so hard, especially after he didn't get into the Hall of Fame. Now you're going to do him like this. You're going to do him dirty like that and put him at number 8. Come on, ESPN.
Another one that I looking at the list again think was a little too low was Bob Gibson. Bob Gibson was 33, and they had several pitchers. I think my only other argument against Walter Johnson, like going back to that, besides Pedro, would be Bob Gibson is probably the other greatest pitcher of all time. He had one of the most dominant stretches of all time. Yeah. And we said 70s baseball and 80s baseball got a little bit neglected, and he had arguably the most. I don't even think it's arguable. I think he had probably the most dominant season for any starting pitcher of all time. I believe his ERA for a whole year was like 1.2. He was unreal.
Yeah. The year of the pitcher, 69 or 60.
Yeah. 1968 was his ERA for a full season. And this is in 304 innings with 268 strikeouts. He had a 1.12 ERA. With the 1.7 FIP. He just destroyed everybody, and they had him a little bit ahead of Sandy Koufax. Sandy Koufax only pitched for what?
10 years.
Yeah, 10 years. He didn't. I don't know. The list was all over the place.
Definitely.
Really quick, since we're running out of time, who's your number one snub that didn't make the list?
I'm sure you could guess this beforehand, but I also couldn't just come up with one. So I wrote like 6. It was mostly just from the article that ESPN had posted about snubs from that from the list. Jeff Bagwell, I thought, was one of the biggest ones. He big power speed guy at first base with great glove. Was a Hall of Famer a few years ago. Got elected. But I definitely think he deserves to be on there, especially with some of the guys that we had talked about, like Stargell and stuff. I think he's above them. Mookie, I think, is the guy who should have replaced Harper. Mookie's just like Yeah, he's got the defense, he's got the hitting, he's won an MVP, he's won a couple championships. I definitely would have him over Harper at this point. And then there were 3 Negro Leagues players who I thought should have a chance. Bullet Rogan is like the Shohei Ohtani of the Negro Leagues. He was incredible. He played all 9 positions, pitched and hit. Just incredible. Buck Leonard is like the Lou Gehrig of the Negro Leagues. He was on a team with Josh Gibson, who's on this list. So basically, he was like the Lou Gehrig to Josh Gibson's Babe Ruth. And then the last one is Smokey Joe Williams, who was a starter in the Negro Leagues. And he was basically what Satchel Paige was to the second half of Negro Leagues baseball in the first half to Negro Leagues baseball. So Smokey Joe Williams was one of just the best starters in the Negro Leagues during its early years.
I think as a whole, the Negro Leagues got a little bit disrespected in general.
Definitely.
Their top representative position-wise was Josh Gibson, and he was in the middle 30s.
Yeah, I think he's 35.
And he's supposedly the all-time professional baseball home run leader. My big snub was Bert Blyleven. He's 15th in WAR for starting pitchers all time. And I think we said wasn't he 3rd in Jaws? He's in the top 5 in Jaws at least. He had over 3,700 strikeouts, which would be the 5th most for any starting pitcher or any pitcher in general in MLB history. He's not on the list at all. Just didn't make the list. And some of the ones that I thought were on the list that kind of took away from his position was I like John Smoltz, but John Smoltz was on and not Bert Blyleven. And the one that really kind of confused me, and I think it was mainly down to bias on how good he was in the postseason, was Jim Palmer. Jim Palmer had a good career. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, Bert Blyleven didn't make the list, and he's, a top 10 pitcher ever. Really, I just again, I think there was a lot of disrespect towards 70s and 80s baseball, which is where Blyleven played, and a lot of the early part of his career, he played on some not very good teams. He eventually did win 2 championships, but that was later in his career. And we're running out of time, so we'll go ahead and close it with our closing segment we do every week. Let's bring in the closer. Jake, go ahead and rattle off some stats about this week's closer.
Yeah, all right. So today, to shut down the podcast, earn us that save, secure the dub for the team, is Liam Hendriks of the Chicago White Sox. He was born in Perth, Australia, so he's got that sick Aussie accent. He's had an 11-year career from 2011 to 2021. He started out with the Twins, then went to the Blue Jays, went to the Royals, back to the Blue Jays. Then he pitched with the A's, where he became a star, and now he signed with the White Sox just a couple off seasons ago. He made his debut in September of 2011 against the White Sox, who he currently pitches for, during which he started the game and went 7 innings, allowing only 4 hits and 3 earned, but got the L. So he came up as a starter. And looks like he just right off the bat was getting that bad luck, tough luck L's. But in 2015, he became a full-time reliever after having really poor results in the rotation, and he started to look more like a dominant reliever. But his career really didn't take off until 2019, where he increased his fastball velocity by 2 miles per hour and used his curveball a lot more. So he's a fastball slider and now a curveball pitcher. He used his changeup a little while he was starting, but he switched to relieving and changed his repertoire. Excuse me. And that led to his first All-Star appearance in 2019, where he pitched 85 innings with 25 saves, a 1.80 ERA, a 0.96 whip, and a 37.3% strikeout rate, where like 30% is elite and 25% is around league average. The next year, he got even better. It was the shortened 2020 season. He finished 9th in Cy Young award voting and 13th in MVP with a 1.78 ERA and a 0.67 whip and a 40% strikeout rate. He's jumping that up even 3 more percent. And then after signing with the White Sox in the offseason after 2020, he was an all-star for the second time in his career last year. He finished 8th in Cy Young this time, and he threw 71 innings with an AL best 38 saves. He had a 2.54 ERA and a 0.73 whip over a full season with a 42.3% strikeout rate. And the craziest part about his season last year is not just the strikeouts and not just the saves and how amazing of a pitcher he's become, but is that he just keeps getting better with his control. He had a 16.14 strikeout to walk ratio, which is mind blowing. He had 16 strikeouts for every walk that he allowed. I think during the whole season, he had close to 100 strikeouts and fewer than like 10 walks or something. It was ridiculous. So he won the AL Reliever of the Year award in both 2020 and 2021, as he was just the best reliever in baseball for the last 2 years. And I think the most memorable moment that he's had was the 2021 All-Star broadcast, where he was mic'd up, and I think he thought his mic wasn't working, and he started to let loose the swear words a little bit. And it was really funny. Definitely go look that up. Pitching Ninja's probably got a breakdown of it, and probably John Boy as well. But yeah, Liam Hendriks is here to lock down this podcast.
All right. Well, thanks for watching again. Join us again every other Monday. So it'll be a Monday from now, where we'll talk about, hopefully conclude to to union negotiations with the MLB and anything more that happens in the baseball sphere. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.
So yeah.